Right, so we'll edit out this part. We'll post it online. Okay, take two of your small. All right, so everyone, thank you for coming to Leveling the Playing Field. High quality, customizable scouting for everyone. Thank you for coming out. We're gonna try and cover a lot of stuff very quickly, so we'll do questions at the end, that's okay. So what to expect? We'll kind of give quick introductions, go over a bit of the history of the Scoutradioz platform, and then really go into sort of the what it does, but really why it does what it does as well. And then touch on how the community can contribute and add on to the project. So I'm Michael O'Connell. I'm one of the scouting mentors from Team 102, the Gearheads out of New Jersey.
And I'm the team president, Nick Jampino, and I was the previous scouting lead last year.
And I want to give a shout out to my co-mentor for Scoutradioz, Jordan Lees, who was an alumni mentor who now works for Intel in Washington State. But a lot of the heart and soul of Scoutradioz was Jordan's work, so I want to give him he's here in spirit. So real quick, so why do we scout in FRC? Strategy, tips, and scales in your favor. If anyone had gone to Karthik's presentation, you probably heard a lot of that from the Karthik presentation. If you didn't see that, it'll be posted online, I'm sure. And it's not just for line selection. Your drive team, your strategy team can use analytics and data to help win matches at, say, Statbotics or the Blue Alliance thinks that you're going to lose because you can out-strategize the other alliance. All your quals and stuff, get ranking points and all that. So that's really important. Pardon me. No good at public speaking, so we're not breath already. So let's get into what Scoutradioz has to offer. So basically, what is this? We call it scouting as a service. What is this scouting as a service idea? So off the top, it's free. There's no cost to use it. It's easy to use. It doesn't require any kind of dedicated hardware. You don't have to buy any tablets or whatnot. Everybody uses their own phones and such. It's customizable. That's basically the secret sauce of Scoutradioz. The real-life data folks last year referred to us as the Kitbot of Scouting. It's essentially a scouting app that lets teams build their own scouting maps. And basically, it's powerful. We try and bring high-quality metrics, analytics and things to teams that don't have necessarily the students or the mentors or whatnot to generate that for themselves. Lots of teams, if I see all kinds of teams doing their own scouting systems, they've got maybe 100 kids in the team, they have this amazing application, that's fantastic. But for teams that have fewer students, like we're only 27 students in 102, it's hard to find, the expertise, time, and passion to build that. So, that's kind of what we're trying to do. Once we build it for ourselves, we want to share that with the rest of the folks. So we're trying to bridge that gap, to bring that kind of high quality analytics to teams that don't necessarily have the same level of expertise. So how did we get here? In 2018, I was a team parent, I became a mentor, and we decided at that point, as a parent, I would see students, we would have 2 students scouting, all the other students sit in the stands. Nobody wanted to scout because the software was a problem. So we decided to rewrite it in JavaScript, full stack JavaScript. And we had it on a server, we fall over, we moved to the AWS in 2020, so fast and so cheap. We thought, hey, we could have other teams use this. So starting in 2022, we opened it up. We had 3 brave souls that first year, 3 brave teams that wanted to join us, and they worked with us through all the bugs and things. 2023 it really took off, so in 2024, we officially came out of open access. So quick shout out to our early access partners, the folks who were with us through 2023. Their collaboration and their feedback and such helped really help make the application what it is today. So just as mentioned, before 2018, Team 102 had a lot of challenges when it came to scouting. I'm sure other teams have heard similar stories. The app was hard to use, or I think even earlier it was probably pencil and paper. Nobody wanted to scout. Students were idle on board, so we wanted to shift things up. And so the solution was to make it fun, but really, a lot of this presentation, you're gonna see a lot of technology, but at the core of it, it's about changing scouting culture. So we've used the technology of the Scoutradioz platform as a mechanism to help teams, our team and other teams, change their scouting culture, bring the students in with the idea that everyone has a job. Scouting is important. Help the students understand that it's important, but also make it really easy for them to scout, and really easy for the scouting leads and such to put together the scouting forums. Do you want to touch base on that level?
Yeah, so honestly, for me, when I walked in last year into the scouting lead role, I had no background in any sort of coding or anything, but immediately, I picked up on being able to, make the scouting forms within, a couple of days. It's really simple, it's super easy and, intuitive, so as long as you, have a template, which obviously we offer, you can kind of just tweak it to whatever you like and kind of make it yours.
And the big thing is that it's reusable year to year. So that code reuse meant that instead of having to rewrite a buggy app every year, we could refine it and add more features and help polish it up. So we talked about it being a web app on your phone. So early on, people want to ask, hey, do you have an offline component? We went to a competition in Philadelphia called Springside Chestnut Hill, where there are no cell towers for miles. So that was very difficult. After that, we built out what's called Voyager. So there's an add-on module that goes with Scoutradioz. It's basically written and spelled. It's a progressive web app, and it's all QR code based. The scouting lead can give all the assignments to the scouts with QR codes. They collect all the data. They go pit scouting, match scouting, show them QR codes back to the scouting lead. The usual process. Now the scouting lead still has to walk outside for their signal, or walk to the cafeteria at Springside, upload the data to the cloud, pull down the charts and graphs and such. But it definitely helps with when the gym is a Faraday cage, they have all the solar panels. Also want to touch on the international accessibility. So as we opened it up to teams, we started getting teams from other countries, China and Turkey and Israel and such. So we wanted to also make it accessible to those teams and also their family and friends in the native languages, because not everybody speaks English as a first language. So we had a student who put together a translation package, and now it's in all the languages that FRC does, plus languages like Ukrainian, we're fully translating Ukrainian, and Tamil, and other languages. I think Vietnamese is on the stack. Just a real quick demo of that. So you can see, this is where you would pick the language. We have it in the right, flip to Hebrew, and Hebrew is interesting because it's right to left. So the way the students set up the translation package, it flips the whole map right to left. All the charts and the graphs and everything is flipped as well. Okay, so that's sort of like the basics. Let's get to the meat of it. So what's good for the drive team or the strategy team, or the spectators, the friends and family and such? So here, this is one of folks' favorite views. We call this the all team metrics. Basically, it's a horizontal view of all the metrics that your teams decide to collect. Well, not necessarily all, I'll get to that, but the key metrics that your teams decide to collect. And then all the teams, and all these columns are sortable. If you click on the column headers, you can sort out different metrics and such. You note that instead of saying things like average or maximum, it says trending and capability. This year we changed those over. The trending is an exponential moving average. So it basically shows if a team is getting better during the competition, or hopefully not, but if they're getting worse, it reflects that change. So maybe a team had a couple of reliability issues early on, and then they fix that, they're getting hot. You want to know that, so that's a good alliance pick later on. Likewise, maximum isn't really statistically interesting, but capability is a 90th percentile number. So that gives you more of a meaningful idea of a team's ceiling. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So honestly, for me, this is a super important page. I use this constantly as a scouting lead. Really, you look through it, it has all that you need, basically. It has all the stats that you need. It's super easy to use where you can kind of sort by the column. So if you click on the top, like the header, it'll do it by most to least. So you'll know, okay, this team is really good at auto. They have a 20-point auto. You can know where you rank within certain metrics, which is really good for picks and understanding where people are, where their strengths and where their weaknesses are.
All right, so wall of data is interesting, but let's get into more. Well, I do want to mention the metrics and the customization. So this is how it works. This is how the app works in the background. Like on the right side, you see the form. On the left, you see the JSON definition. So it's essentially low code or even no code. Teams share their forms. You can just clone that. I think a lot of teams just take somebody else's form and customize it from there. So on the bottom, you can see things like we describe, hey, I want a header, a couple of check boxes, a counter. On the top are probably hard to read, but those are the derived metrics. So maybe you're collecting, hey, what do they count? What do they score in L1, L2, L3, L4, choral, auto? But you want to know, well, what's the total choral in auto? So you just add them up. It's kind of like an Excel spreadsheet. So that's what all the formulas are on the upper left there. And those derived metrics are really what teams look at in their charts and graphs and such. Then once you define all that JSON, not only does it make the forms, it makes all the charts and graphs automatically. And then further, I talked about the columns. So Team 102 this year defined about 60 or 70 data points and metrics to collect. But you don't want to see a giant table. It's actually, some teams do. But our team opted, we only want to see about 20 metrics in those columns in the charts. So you can decide what to show up in the charts and in the graphs and things. And again, this is how you customize and define not just the match scouting form, but also your pit scouting forms and such. You want to touch on that, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's really just useful to kind of only see what you need in a given moment, declutter stuff, and especially if you're looking at, like, later in the line when we talk about line selection, it's really good to only have the metrics you want to look at while you have that timer ticking down. You have to figure out what your next pick is. It's really important to have it very clear, very easy to see, very easy to understand.
So now, this is a really popular feature, the Drive Team Dashboard. So here, teams can look at basically their next match. So we're looking at 11. You see in the upper left there, more number 11. I think they're in Curie this year, right now. So this is basically during the finals of our district championship. So it shows which teams in their which teams are in their alliance, who are they up against. It gives what the app thinks mathematically is the match prediction. And then you can kind of see things like the visual comparisons of the two teams, two alliances. But just kind of high level, what are their relative capabilities? Sometimes some matches it's pretty obvious that one team is going to be more powerful. And then below that is another heat map, but focused in on just the teams from those two alliances.
Yeah, so this is really, really important, especially when you're talking strategy. This is absolutely my favorite page. So if you look at the spider charts, I use those really to just kind of see the general overlay of like where a team is good. So like you can see like, it's kind of like a spread type thing, where if you look at the spread and they're really good in a spread of like all teleop things, you know where people are like generally good at. It's a lot quicker to know like, oh, they're really good because I can see the chart is like big and expansive than necessarily looking at the numbers. It's just a quick glance. And then on top of that, having the metrics side by side is really nice because you can visually like see the difference instead of always having to go and break it down into numerical, which you have both, but the visual, at least for me, shows and helps me a lot. And then the general like predictions and everything is super good because if you know that you're not going to have a good chance at a match and you know it's probably going to be a blowout, you know to work towards ranking points. And then you can look at the types of like climbs that your teammates have, if they can do like algae in the barge or whatever, all those types of things. Like you can look at all the things that you need to look at, and it's always there.
It's also interesting to know that the predictions are just math. They're just a suggestion. In this case, Mord's Alliance won this match, and they won the district championships by out-strategizing. They were Alliance 2. Alliance 1 was a seriously high-powered scoring team, but they got out-strategized. Now you notice, by the way, down here, there's a couple of qualitative notes, but there's even more, qualitative notes if you want to drill into a team. So this is more the vertical view of data. So here we're looking at a single team. This is 5895. That's one of those high-powered robots in Alliance 1. And here you see, this page, I've sort of brought all the vertical parts together, but you see the pit scouting data, you see sort of a deeper look into their individual metrics, not just the trending and capability, but also the spread, the standard deviation, and their floor, the 10th percentile of, hey, what's probably the worst they're going to do? What are they almost guaranteed to get you? And then you get all the qualitative notes the scouts have put in, and your super scouts. So those are pretty useful.
Yeah, I can say that from experience. Because sometimes, right, like you're scouting a league, you're working on trying to herd the cats in a way, but when you actually look at the data and you look at like what they're talking about, it's really good to see that qualitative data or that quantitative data sometimes, especially when you're talking strategy. Because a good thing, like last year with what was it? Crescendo, that's the one. Like you can kind of realize that there was a choke point between the stage and then both the sides, right? And it was a good thing to have the scouts talk about the pathing of the robots and realize, okay, these robots always go on this side. They always route this way, so it's a much easier way to kind of figure out where you have to defend and stuff like that. Like it's really useful for the data that numbers won't tell you, and you're always going to have it right next to the numbers too, so you can kind of look at both of them, look side by side, and double check. But qualitative data is king with strategy.
Sure. So then hopefully you can do well enough that you get to align selection. Another popular screen is the align selection dashboard. So I'm not showing here is you generate your own pick lists, and then you can sort. There's a table underneath that shows all the teams. It's like the all team metric, but it has your pick list column sort. Above, it actually has the align selection process. You follow along. You know who's currently been invited. Did they accept and whatnot? And as teams are no longer able to be picked, they get grayed out. And if someone's been selected, they get highlighted. So you can kind of see when it's your turn who's next best up in your pick list. So a lot of teams really like this. They find that, particularly with the new accelerated pick list schedule. One thing we're going to add for the future is the ability to mark a decline. Right now we don't have that, so teams got to remember who's declined.
Yeah, and this page is really good. I mean, it's been so invaluable because obviously having it grayed out helps a lot with like stressing out. Oh my gosh, did I pick somebody? Am I looking at somebody who's already hit? That's like a huge stress, especially with that 45-second timer in the beginning. It's just like, ah. But then on top of that, like having everything in one place, and for me, at least for my pick list, I put certain types of roles in the numbers. So I'll have like my first picks, plural, be all like the same role. So let's say I want a really good L4 scorer. I'll have all my number one picks as those, so then I can sort it by the picks and have them all side by side and be like, okay, well this one is better at L4 scoring, but it also can climb. Like you just look at all the stuff and it keeps it all nice and organized for you, so you can kind of make that pick, even if it's like a last second, like, who am I gonna go with? You don't have to really worry. If you're all set up and you do all your work, it's gonna come through.
Cool. Now one thing I also want to mention, you see a lot of red-green heat maps. So we did have a drive captain who was colorblind one year, and they just couldn't read the heat maps. So one of our wish list items was to make more colorblind accessibility. So a student this year picked it up and ran with it. So now new this year is the ability to pick a color scheme for the heat maps. So he created these heat maps. He did some research on CD and on the internet and came up with these names and such. So that's pretty cool. So now we have more colorblind accessibility. All right, so that's all the drive team is. So who collects all this data? What's good for the scouts? So the scouts get a dashboard when they log in, where they can see all their assignments in a single page. They can see their pit scouting assignments plus their partners' pit scouting assignments. The app encourages people to send out pit scouts in groups of 2, sometimes 3, depends on your team. Partly because it helps to have a buddy when you go pit scouting. My son had really bad social anxiety, for example, and it really helped to have somebody with him when he was going to a team, and vice versa. He could provide moral support.
Yeah, and this page is really good because when you have a lot of people, even when we like are scouting with other teams on our instance, right? It's really good for them to have basically a schedule, and they know when their next match is, they know what number it is, what the estimated time that won't be right in 2 seconds is, and all of like the teams that they're looking at, so they can also like, let's say before their match, if they have a break, they can look at the pits and like talk to the people who they're about to scout or anything like that, right? It's just really useful for all this type of stuff.
Yeah, and so in terms of the scouting, so here's an example of one of the pit scouting forms that we did one year. But again, this is customizable team to team. So the forms that you see here are what we did. But you put sliders and drop downs, whatever kinds of data collection methods you want, images. So new this year we're able to add images to forms. So you can sort of have an image diagram and say, hey, where do they start or where do they like to do their autos or whatnot. Oh, and scouts during pit scouting can take at least one photo of the robot. The photo is useful because that shows up in the match scouting form. So when they go to match scout, they're like, well, which one's my robot? Oh, it looks like this. Okay, there it is.
So much easier than trying to look for the bumper numbers. It sucks when especially you're at like a smaller competition, you can't see over the rail. It's so much easier.
And then also, a similar example, there's the match scouting form. So the scouts will see hopefully a good picture of the robot on the top, and they basically just track the information the team wants to collect. Usually this year we have a pre-auto section, but it's up to the team. What do they do in auto? What do they do in teleop? Some end game information. Qualitative notes, that sort of thing. It really depends on what you guys want to collect.
Yeah, it's really just kind of to your needs. That's the really important thing about this whole thing, is the app is kind of very flexible, and whatever you want to collect, you can get. And whatever strategy or anything you want to run, it's just all up to you. you got sky's the limit.
And it's important to note that the app is set up so that you can train the scouts on historical events. So once you designed your form, after week 0, you can basically replay week 0 for your scouts. You can watch week 0 on video and have them try out and get a hang of the form and such. That's really helpful. We found training the scouts makes for much better data collection. All right, so speaking of scouting leads, well, what's good for the scouting leads? How to make it easier to manage all this? So there's actually a lot of features and things. I'm not going to go into all of them. But ultimately, it's about how do you wrangle this? How do you wrangle the scouts? How do you help them do the best job possible? So we'll touch on a couple of these. So match assignments are automated. The Blue Alliance will send the match schedules for all the events in FRC. Then they come into the application, and then the scouting league can say, okay, well, I want to have scouts say 5 matches on, 5 matches off. Or if you only say you have fewer scouts, maybe 6 matches on, 3 matches off. So then you generate that up, and the scouts get a schedule. So they'll see their dashboard, but the scouting league will also see this screen.
Yeah, and this is really important, especially because if, let's say, one of my scouts is going to the bathroom and they're about to miss a match, I can see on this screen, okay, here's their thing, and I can click in and go into the form and cover it for them. On top of that, it's really useful to like make sure that everybody's form is submitted, because even though like some venues have decent enough Wi-Fi, there's always like those instances where it's just not going to go through for some reason. That's with like everything.
The grayed out button is a submitted.
Yeah. So it's good to kind of have that as an insurance and be like, yeah, I see it submitted. I can not worry about this and use it.
And plus, like parents or other students or whatnot can jump in and cover for people. They can see this one-off dashboard and go, okay, I got to cover for Nick, because Nick's not here or whatnot. So again, as match results flow in from the Blue Alliance automatically, this dashboard results roll off, so the dashboard constantly refreshes with the latest next match. So as everybody knows, you just tell the scouts to do their scouting, and they do the job, right? Right? So, yes. We have a lot of audit pages that enable the scouting lead to keep track of who's doing their job, who's doing it correctly, who's doing it well. For example, this page shows scouts, and so far through the competition, which assignments have they done, which ones have they had covered, did they miss any? So this person down here missed 1 match on the bottom. We've had pretty good coverage from our scouts, I have to say.
Yeah, it's just really good for making sure that everybody's doing their job on a top-down view, making sure that everybody's covering all their matches so that when you look at the data, you're not looking at the wrong data.
So then we basically tell folks having bad data is worse than having no data. If somebody shows up late and says, I missed auto, I can scout. We're like, no, don't scout, because then we'll have no data for the auto section. We can always cover that later. So, this screen, we have a screen that's called SPR. If you've heard of OPR, basically it's the same thing as linear algebra, and it uses the Blue Alliance data from headquarters compared to the Scouts metrics to see, hey, maybe the Scouts data adds up to 140 points. But headquarters says they only scored 120 points in that alliance. So there's 20 points of error there. Who caused the error? In any one match, you can't tell. But over the course of the competition, you can do linear algebra and solve, essentially, fuzzily, for how much error each scout is introducing. That's what this SPR number is. Lower is better. You can't even have negative, because the linear algebra is a little weird in the corners. That's okay. Really, I just tell the scouts, you want to be in the top half.
Yeah, and this is really useful when you're trying to make sure that your data is accurate, because there's sometimes where it'll happen where somebody messes up and they didn't see that, they thought somebody climbed when actually they parked, right? Maybe they fell down, they just put in parked or put in climb instead of parked. That's a 10-point differential, right? It's a big difference. And it's very easy to just overlook that and just have that bad data sit there, but in our case, we don't like having that there, so a lot of times, like, if I'm looking at all these differentials and I'm seeing like, okay, this person's struggling, it's really good to kind of talk to them and make sure that they understand everything. We can always get somebody to scout with them. There's always the opportunity to just move them. Maybe like there's a team in front of them that's standing up every time. That's always not fun when you're trying to scout. So there's it's very helpful to try to help the scout a lot of the times in this way. And it also helps the scouting lead when you're going to pick, because then you'll have the most accurate data. Because it shouldn't be wrong.
And not shown here, but below this table is a table of all the matches and those differentials that we're talking about. So you can highlight which matches have the biggest point differences and figure out which matches you might need to rescout, or just delete the data if somebody was goofing around and put 102 for Coral scored auto or something. So ultimately it's about, hey, is the job being done? Is it being done professionally? We have some screens making sure that people don't put in clever stuff in the text boxes or clever photos or whatnot. Is it being done well? Is it being done accurately? So I also want to touch briefly on manual data entry. A lot of off-season events, what do you call it? A lot of off-season events, they show up on the blue lines, but they're not streamed to the blue lines, so that you don't get synced of the match results or the match schedule and whatnot. So you can, if you need to, go to an off-season, type in the team list, type in the schedule, type in the results. Also came in really handy last year when FRC events had that big issue early on in the season. The number of events I was typing in the match schedule instead of getting into the blue lines. That was no fun. Okay, so how do we get all this done? How does this work? So, I'm not going to go into this whole thing. It's essentially a full-stack, enterprise-grade JavaScript, full-stack JavaScript application. So it's Node and Express squeezed into a Lambda function in AWS with Mongo as the backend, technically Atlas Mongo cloud database. These are all things that as people get leveled up to contribute to the application, these are all things that they learn. Not just things like the architecture and data structures, but getting to things like how the match predictions work. Authentication, internationalization, how the legal aspects of open source software. We use, I think, the AGPL, because we want to be as basically as open sourcey as possible. The other thing is the FRC GPL. I'll drill in briefly into the match predictions, because people ask about that. So basically, the way those match predictions work, over time, as the scouts enter their data, we get that sense of the average that the team's doing, the exponential moving average. And we see the swinginess of their data, the standard deviation. So we combine those two together, so each alliance has an average and a standard deviation. So you can see this equation down here basically works out that the difference of the two averages divided by what I would call the hypotenuse of the standard deviations gives you a z-score. That basically means how many standard deviations to the right or to the left is that prediction going to be. You look it up in the z-table, boom, you get a percentage. I will say that the AMP ceiling's at 99%. Even if the data is actually 100%, there's always a chance. There's always a chance that something could work out. So we never show more than 99%. Now, one thing I do want to mention that, so right now the AMP uses an attribute called contributed points to do the match predictions. That works for a lot of games, but last year's game, that wasn't really a good predicting metric. Those speaker bots would get all the points, attribute to them, but the AMP bots were what enabled the points. Turned out that total nodes is probably a better predictor. So we want to basically update the AMP in the future so that teams can customize which metric they want to use for match predictions. And that kind of leads into, the journey continues. I mean, there's a lot more to be done here. Have a nice big wish list. I've been going around the last couple of days talking to teams and getting even more. Not listed here, for example, everybody wanted on Wednesday, hey, how do we scout practice matches? We don't have that yet, but we want to add that in. Definitely want to make it easier for teams to collaborate, especially small teams. A lot of teams only might have 8 to 10 students, so how do they get effective scouting? There's ways that we can make it easier for those teams to form alliances and such. Customizable charts and graphs. So right now those spider charts are kind of built in, but give teams the ability to add in line charts, historical charts, that sort of thing. So lots of people like to do. So the question is, what's the long-term vision for this? So the goal is to have scouting not just for everyone, but by everyone. We're continuing to transition Scoutradioz to be a community-sourced, fully community-supported open source project. It's only been a few folks up until now, and then the last year or so, we've been getting more community members to contribute. That student who did the heat maps, he came in completely cold in January. He knew nothing about web development. I pointed out a couple of Code Academy classes, HTML, CSS, etc. He went through the Code Academy classes. We had a couple of starter issues, easy bugs to fix, and then he built out that color map. So anybody can do this. You don't have to know in advance. We're willing to work with you and help you upskill and train. So there's a bunch of resources. If you go to our wiki and go down to so that you get into the wiki in the menu, there's a way to get to the wiki. And then down the bar down here is the development section. And that's where you find things like how to set up a dev container Docker image. So that you basically set up Docker, download an image, and boom, that comes with VS Code, database, everything's set up and installed. All the, in there is those links to all those technologies, plus the whole slide deck that explains all those different technologies. All the Code Academy classes that you want to go through if you want to start getting skilled up. And then on GitHub, like I mentioned, we have these to-do issues. So we've selected certain bugs that are good for somebody to come in and do a quick fix, just to get their feet wet and get started. At the end of the day, we're trying to, it's not just the Kitbot of Scouting, also trying to be on the side, sort of the Kitbot of web development. Help people become enterprise web developers and get a sense of how to work on a real live enterprise-grade open source project. So hopefully we covered the key parts. So how the platform can provide value to your driving strategy teams, how it makes it easy and fun for the scouts, and how it helps the scouting lead help the scouters do their best jobs. So, I guess we'll do the Q&A. These two QR codes. One goes to the Learn More page on the Scoutradioz homepage. So that'll have a button to our Discord, a button to sign up in the forum if you want to try it out. A couple of usually link to the wiki. And then on the right, this goes into our wiki, into a page where it helps you get started. So it talks about basically the onboarding process. I'll probably try to make that a little smoother in the future, but it goes pretty well. Teams have signed up and run with it without ever coming back to me. But if you have any questions, the Discord is definitely the way to reach out to us. All right, got time for Q&A. So, any questions? Nick?
Once it auto-generates the match schedules, can you edit them?
So today you can't hand-edit individual scouts, but you can swap scouts in and out. So one scout, if you have somebody, hey look, they're going to be doing an impact presentation, you can say, hey, swap out all their upcoming assignments with another person, so that you can rotate somebody if you need to.
Additionally, you can also just if you know that they're coming in after lunch or anything, or after a big break, you can separate the schedules. You can do the morning schedule, wait to update it till after lunch, and then you can put them in, and then put them in the scout rotation for later.
We have gotten a request a lot to have scouts stick to one color. Right now they alternate randomly move between red and blue. But some events where there's visual issues or whatnot, it's easier for scouts to be always on blue for their block, always on red. So I think we're going to add that in, although I will put an asterisk on that, it'll screw up the SPR calculations to some extent, but that's okay. It's a trade-off.
Will there be development for a version of this for FTC? Because I work with an FTC team in the Pennsylvania region. I'm wondering if there's a way to either port it or if there's something in the works for that.
Absolutely, actually, before we started, I was asking about that. The basic bones of the application should be able to port pretty easily. We just have to change, I would say we fork the project, and then you want to point, instead of taking the blue lines, I think the orange lines is the FTC equivalent.
I think it's still relevant to FTC.
But I'm saying, I think there's a website called the Orange Alliance that provides data for FTC.
Oh, yes.
And of course, you have to change everything where it says 3 alliances to 2 alliances. So I think it's doable. It's probably, again, a fork. But I think if there's anyone, if you know somebody who's got the passion and the interest in doing that, we'd love to work with folks. Because we definitely get that question. I don't have enough experience in FTC to really do that, but if we had a willing partner, that'd be really cool. All right, so I think there's a question back here.
So, will it save match data even if it doesn't upload, so you can upload them later? You have multiple matches that are uploaded.
So the Voyager offline module does that.
Okay.
So once you download the Voyager module, it uses the index DB in the browser as a data source. So you could go into a total Faraday cage, scout 10 matches off of the videotape. They all get stored locally. When you come out, then show 10 QR codes to your scouting lead. Or you can upload them once you have Signal. So Voyager will either use Signal or can do the QR codes. I think Jordan's big vision would be to rewrite the whole application as an extension of Voyager. For that though, I think we need to add a bunch of new technologies, like the ability to transfer big data blocks between phones. So perhaps Bluetooth connectivity. And then I don't want to type in match schedules. So I want OCR on the phone, scanning the match schedule, that kind of stuff.
And then my next question, do you have the ability to correct errors? So if you know that you make a mistake, can you fix it?
I'll take that.
Yeah.
So easiest way to explain that is we had a problem with that last season. We kind of didn't fully teach another team that we were scouting with how to kind of scout through Scoutradioz. It was a little bit rough, but the easiest way to fix everything, I basically poured over the stream for about 3 hours, had it on double speed, and if you just go through it, it's really quick and easy to just have it on one tab, have the stream on another, and just go through it. I even did that at the competition if things went wrong. If they had a match that was really bad, and it's just, there's for some reason that day it was really bad, I'd have a tablet, I'd have the stream up, and then I'd have my phone, do it right there, boop, within like a minute I could fix that data, immediately see the change, know that it's the correct change because it'll show me the difference that will change to a much lower number, and then it's already fixed.
Yeah, so implied there, but just to be clear, in all those scouting audit pages for the team league, you can click on any one of those boxes. At the end, you can scout that match. You click on it, you can scout that form. And in the existing data, you can click into it and then edit it, change it, and resubmit it. For next year, I think I'd like to do is give the scouts their own ability to self-audit themselves and correct their own matches. Like they realize, oh, I made a mistake, have them, because right now those are only accessible to the team league, so that's probably something we definitely want to do for next year. That's all I have over here.
So if you had, like, for example, multiple people from different teams enter the same data, like currently, just to clarify, this is within your own team, right? So all the data that you get is just from what your own scouters scout.
Yep, so basically if you look at that browse page that we had earlier, if you saw that, or if you go to the browse by event in the Scoutradioz app today, you might see multiple teams scouting the same field here.
Yes.
So those are all isolated. Basically, they get their own instance because each one has their own data schema. They don't all scout the same fields.
Yeah.
But I think where you're going is if you had, say, 3 people submit the same match, today there's no way to average those in your organization. Whoever submits most recently will overwrite the other ones. That's how, say, they could correct those other errors. He edited the record.
What if you had, or just like future reference, is there going to be a feature where like let's say you're at an event with another team that is also using Scoutradioz, what if that team is scouting a similar match to you? Could you pull data that other organizations have in their local files and just use their scouting instead of having one of your own scouters scout?
Well, you can definitely today browse all that scouting data that was up on that page. We don't. Yeah, so all the data. So I should say all the data is public, except for what you type in a text box. All that the text stuff in the text box is proprietary to your team, because that way you don't want to, just in case somebody's being honest, that may not go across well. There is a future idea about how to help teams blend data together. So this year we did a bunch of refactoring around how to share schemas. So that's probably going to be a future features, having teams be able to blend their data.
Thank you.
Also, a lot of.
Wait,
No, I don't think I need
But the camera does.
Huh? Oh, the camera needs it.
Yeah.
I think where he's going, we did this a few times in the past couple of years. We've had teams that have asked, can we scout with you? Because we weren't able to bring all our people. So can we join with you? And we all scouted together. So yes, then we shared the data between the 2 teams. And my son's team did that many times in the events he was at that we weren't at. So that is also a possibility. But I know what you were talking about was sharing somebody else's scout data or Scoutradioz instance with yours. But you can also do it that way. Just invite that team to come in.
I think we had a question here.
This is not a question, but a continuation of the young gentleman's question and the answer that he got there. What we did with the team that we shared with back in week 4 is we had one form that everybody was using, and we sat together in the stands so that we could pass our tablets, which we were using, to the person who would be scouting. And each of the names that we registered had the number of the team behind it, so you would know this is Joe from team 1, not Joe from team 2. And if you look at merging 2 different teams who are scouting the same event, they may have different forms. And that is a really complex thing to try and merge data where you have different forms. Sometimes you'll have the same variable with a different name. Sometimes you'll have different variables that sound the same from the name, but they're actually different.
That's a very good point, thank you. Would you want to make it easier to have to do those collaborations? So probably for next year, we'll make that a smoother process.
First of all, thank you for providing such a dense level of information today. You did so much in like 23 minutes. My question's on the scouting mirror analysis. I mean, do you go to another level of analysis in terms of what type of error it was a scout so you can get targeted training to the scout? Like, let's say they always mess up the hang, always misinterpret the hang or misinterpret a core or something else. Is there that next level of analysis?
So there's not like necessarily like a numerical way to show it, but like yeah, that's the key word. But whenever you rescout it, you obviously can see what's the difference, obviously, because we'll put in a new one. But especially we'll get often teams will use our app or use our data and be like, oh, actually in that match we got 7 notes and not 5. And that's an easy way to be like, okay, I think we need to make sure that we're looking at the arc, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's very easy to like see it as soon as somebody like points it out, where it's like, oh, I think that you aren't realizing, or you're not interpreting this correctly. It's like an easy fix, like, okay, let's go check everything. Let's see the diffs. Let's see the differentials and see if there's a consistent 2-point diff or whatever, and just go in, you know.
The type of diff, like if it's going to be, so you can train them on either watch closer or hanging versus watching on.
Right, so just, you know, the follow-on was the type of diff. It's not there yet, but so one of the things we did this year was we enabled teams to, like the scouter accuracy used to be just based on that contributed points value. But in a game like, what was it, Charged Up, where they had links, no one robot did a link per se, but then they were part of the score. So we had this weird sort of fudgy way to handle that. But I would rather have ignored links. So now you have a way you can customize what you want to ignore. So this year we're ignoring the bar scores, so we don't have the scouts watching the human players. We have a separate metric that doesn't show up in the charts. You might have seen it where we excluded that in the charts online. Hopefully nobody has epilepsy. Sorry, too much flashing screen there. So like the SPR points. So SPR points is what does a robot score without counting the bars. So we count processor as 6, that kind of stuff. Normally we just count processors 2 points. But here, then we can say in the little customization, hey, take the HQ score, subtract balance, and subtract barge points. So now we have the ability to start keying the data off of what's in that FRC HQ data set. We can probably start next year targeting some of those accuracy ratings. Like, hey, these 3 metrics add up to that one in the HQ data set, so we can start targeting that. So that's on the wish list.
This might be something that comes pretty far in the future, or like the technology isn't ready for it yet, but what do you think about using AI or computer vision to watch the stream before you do scouting?
So actually that was a April Fool's joke last year. Which we had a link, hey, listen, we tried out AI video and the link was a rickroll. But that being said, it's not that far into the future. I think people are trying to do that. We'll take one more question, then I think I'm going to hand out banners and then we got to wrap it up.
Just to respond to that question, do you have a system that does that? It's
Ooh.
very, it's very possible.
Cool. All right, talk to this person. 100%. All right, so thank you, everyone. Get back to my. There we go. Thank you for attending. Much appreciated. And then if anyone wants to grab a badge ribbon, an iHeart Scoutradioz, come on up.
Like, Kat used to share